The Sleeping Beauty from 50 Famous Fairy Tales. Long and long ago, in the olden days, when things were still to be had for by wishing them, a king and queen wished that they might have a beautiful baby daughter. When the child was born, the king was so overjoyed that he ordered a great feast to be prepared, and he invited 7 fairies of the kingdom to come to the baby's christening. Excuse me. The 7 fairies came, but with them another fairy, a quite old one, whom the king had not invited. She had not been heard from for over 50 years, and the king had forgotten that she ever even lived in his kingdom. The old fairy was quite angry at having been left out, and she mumbled and grumbled and acted so rude that the king became worried. It was a custom in those days for the guests at the christening to give presents to the child, and the king feared that perhaps the old fairy would give something evil. The king was not the only one to think thus. The youngest fairy suspected it also and determined she give her gift last so that she might undo the old fairy's evil wish if it were at all possible. So with this in mind, she hid behind the curtain and waited till the other fairies had spoken their wishes for the newborn child. The fairies came up one by one to the crib and touched the tiny princess with their hands and bestowed their gifts. She shall be the most beautiful person in all the world, said the first. She shall have the disposition of the angels, said the second. She shall have a grace of a fairy, said the third. She will dance the will o' the wisp, said the fourth. She will sing like a bird, said the fifth. She'll be able to play any instrument, said the sixth. Then the old fairy stepped forward. When she is 16 years old, she shall prick her finger on the spindle of a spinning wheel, and she shall die from it, she said with a look of evil triumph. Everyone gasped in dismay. But the 7th and youngest fairy came out from behind the curtain and said, I cannot undo entirely what the last fairy has done, but I can grant that the girl shall not die, but shall sleep for 100 years. The king thanked the youngest fairy, but to be on the safe side, he immediately sent out a decree that all the spindles in land be burned. The king thought that now that his child would be safe. All went well for many years, and the girl grew more and more beautiful every day. She was so kind and thoughtful that everyone loved her dearly. She sang and danced as no one else in the kingdom had ever done. About the time of the princess's 16th birthday, the king and queen were extremely busy with the affairs of the state and left the princess to amuse herself. She became restless and decided to explore the whole castle from the deepest dungeon to the highest tower. Far up in the tower, she saw a door she'd never seen before. So, of course, she opened it, and inside sat a little old woman spinning. It was the old fairy in disguise. What are you doing? The princess asked, for she had never seen anyone spin. The woman held out her spindle and invited the girl to sit down and spin. The princess was eager to try this new occupation, and she held out her hand to take the spindle. No sooner had she touched it that she fell on the couch as if dead. But she was not dead. She was just asleep. Then all over the castle, people began to nod and doze. The king began to snore right in the middle of a conference, and all the statesmen put their heads down on the table and slumbered soundly. The queen fell asleep over her sewing, and the cook dropped off with his head in a bowl of bread dough. The cat and the dog, the page boys, serving maids, even sparrows in the courtyard, all went soundly to sleep. And the minute the princess pricked her finger, a huge wall of thorns grew up over the castle, shutting it off entirely to the rest of the world. A new king from a far-off country came to rule the land. And by, nearly everyone forgot about what lay behind the wall of thorns and only knew that it was a dense forest through which no one dared make his way. However, an old woman remembered the sleeping princess, and this woman told her daughter, who told her daughter, who told her daughter, who happened to become a nurse in the royal palace. Exactly 100 years to the day after the princess had fallen into the enchanted sleep, the nurse told the prince, who was a handsome young man by now, the story of what lay behind the wall of thorns. I shall wake this princess, the prince cried. He went to the castle grounds immediately. The thorny wall parted as though it had been expecting him. The prince went into the castle. Such a place! Dust a foot thick, and everyone asleep. The prince went through room after room and finally came to the place where the princess lay. He was so entranced by her beauty that for a moment he just stood staring down upon her. Then he stooped and gently kissed her. Immediately she opened her eyes and said, My prince, I have waited so long for you. With these words, the whole castle woke. The king went on with his conference. The queen took up her sewing. The cook shaped the bread dough into loaves. The page boys and serving maids went about their business, and the birds began to sing. As for the prince and princess, they were deeply in love and wanted married at once. And so that was so. And after years, they became king and queen and ruled the land wisely and well.